員招待による威力偵察準備完了。
全該当地区の避難完了を確認しました。
郡山君、今度は本当だな。間違いないな。
私は現場の報告を信じるだけです。目標依然進行中です。
総理、武器使用の承認をお願いします。
武器の使用を許可する。
総理の加盟を確認しました。
射撃を許可する。射撃開始。
弾作戦フェーズ1を開始する。射撃開始。繰り返す。射撃開始。遅れ。
CP、C まで人了解。射撃する。発射用意。発射。
Right, we're rolling.
Welcome to Lost and Found and Rewound, where we've just watched the 2016 film Shin Godzilla. I'm Chris Lost.
I'm Found Jim.
I am Rick Rewound.
Well, I've decided I listened to the whole first season, and I presented Rick and Jim with an itinerary for these episodes. And so we're gonna be a little more planned. We're doing everything in sequence now. We've got a planned itinerary. And this point in the itinerary, we have 10 minutes of pleasantries. Although we've been with each other for over 3 hours now.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much more pleasantry I have in me.
Why don't I give a synopsis and then we can start talking about the movie? Since, we are time boxed now, we've established that as well. Godzilla appears in Honda Bay, sparking a rapid succession of administrative meetings. A series of rooms are utilized to formulate a coordinated effort to neutralize the threat. Calling on the defensive provisions in Article 76, Japan declares war for the first time since World War II. They figure out Gojira is nuclear and requires a blood coagulation to stop. After tremendous amounts of Japanese military aggression, the U.S. arrives with Missouri bombers and makes the creature bleed. Unfortunately, that only made Gojira grow offensive and defensive lasers, causing immeasurable damage to Tokyo. Facing global devastation in an unprecedented move, the United States proposes dropping a nuclear bomb on Japan and then doesn't do it.
Unprecedented move?
Did you hear my whole sentence?
Say it again.
Let me reread
Yeah,
it. I
okay.
caught Rick in a Rick trap. I tried to do this with Harry Morgan and McLean Stevenson, and it didn't work.
It didn't work, but this time it did.
Facing global devastation in an unprecedented move, the United States proposes dropping a nuclear bomb on Japan and then doesn't do it.
Okay. All right. That's the punchline. I get it. This little twist at the end. And then doesn't do it. Unprecedented. I got it.
Thanks to origami, they froze Godzilla and rebuilt Japan, leaving the hot U.S. and Japanese politicians to be the first marriage between a Japanese prime minister and the U.S. president.
Did you just spoil the sequel?
And that's what happened, right?
Did you guys feel like the future Japanese prime minister, the man? I kept getting David Bowie vibes off of him.
Oh, yeah.
Like Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. Like some kind of weird feedback loop where now David Bowie's Japanese influence is now feeding back into Japanese actors.
I agree.
All right.
Hi.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, no. I thought that was the end.
Hi, is that how you say yes in Japanese? I should probably not try to speak Japanese. What do you all think about my choice of this film? I know Rick took a jab at it before. I picked it because, although it was a 2016 film, it totally reminded me of a movie that I thought was amazing, but I didn't think a lot of people had seen. What are your thoughts? You think that I should be disqualified for picking this film?
And the jab was just that I was saying that it was not an old movie.
You can't watch it on VHS.
VHS.
It's not something we saw back in the day and now think needs to be unearthed.
I'll let Jim answer.
It's a new season. It's season 2. Hey, it's like those meetings in the movie. You have to break out of your old ways of thinking. You got to tackle a problem from another way. Just don't drop a bomb on it, You got to coagulate it,
That's what I'm just coagulating the podcast.
Definitely coagulating the podcast.
I liked the the puppy Godzilla at the beginning. That was my favorite.
What was that called in the earlier Godzilla eras? There was a baby Godzilla, right? What was it called? Godzilla Jr.?
Gadzooks. Or Gadzooks was the one on the cartoon, right?
Yeah, but there was so what's weird is there's like, again, speaking, I had spoke previously about Green Acres being on this channel, free TV channel constantly. There's also been of late a Godzilla channel, so I have actually been watching bits and pieces of the whole, 60-year, 70-year history now of that. And so, yeah, things pop in and out, and there is, the baby Godzilla era, where the little cute baby Godzilla. But this was not a cute baby Godzilla.
We saw this movie in 2016 and lost Tom Lost got way into Godzilla, and they bought me a Godzilla Blu-ray box set. It came in this beautiful, huge box or book that unfolded and had all the old films from the original series. I think there's been 3 or 4 different series of Godzilla films. I need to watch that. I haven't watched that yet, but I did get a Godzilla pinball machine, which Nick Carroll, who you've both met, he owns a pinball punk rock bar in Lawrence, Kansas, and has, played almost every pinball machine that's rotated through there. And he last Sunday said, it's a new classic, Godzilla pinball machine. And It really is. I am absolutely addicted to playing it. I've watched all these tutorials on how to play it. It is one of the most phenomenal pinball machines I've ever played.
Is there something special about it? Does it have some special features?
It's just got a lot of games and modes and things that, when you lose your ball prematurely, they have a little scene with that baby Godzilla, and Godzilla shocks its head and it says, get back in there, and it gives you a new ball.
Oh, nice.
It's so cool. There's a building in it, and you hit balls into the building until it collapses, and then you load that's how you lock your balls in the building and start a multi-ball. Mm-hmm. There's jet attacks, there's flying saucer attacks. You battle all different kaijus that Godzilla battled throughout the films.
Mothra? Is there Mothra?
Mothra helps you. If you get the Mothra, if you shoot the scoop and you get what's it called? An ally. You get an ally upgrade. If your ball goes down I forget what they're called, but the left gutter, you know how those gutters will steal your ball and there's nothing you can do? There's a Mothra gutter, and Mothra will kick you a ball back out, and it goes, Mothra, and kicks out the ball, and you're like, yes,
thank you, Mothra. Which is the one? Is Mothra the one where? So I remember when I would watch these Godzilla movies when I was a kid, the old ones, and there was one where Godzilla's plunging its hands into the body of one of the other monsters and pulling out its eggs or something.
Ooh, I don't know.
Is that Mothra? I feel like that's not Mothra. Somebody will know. There are people who are much more invested in this universe than I am.
I'll know. So my son stole my box set and took it to his new home, but he's bringing it back for me to watch all the Godzillas. Okay. He's very excited for me to.
Please make a note. Yeah, and then so I don't watch that. And relive one of the most horrific things I saw as a child.
I do remember Gamera, but I don't think Gamera and Godzilla crossed over. Gamera was the turtle that would have flames in its holes. It would pull in its arms and legs and spin like a saucer.
Gamera, yeah.
But yeah, so Rick, did you enjoy Shin Godzilla?
I did enjoy it, and it made me realize. And when I was watching the original Godzilla and then a couple of the other ones, and I should say, I'm trying to remember the one I watched that's from the 60s, and it's just oh, wow, this is all Wes Anderson. There's a mid-period 60s Godzilla film where it's just oh, this is everything Wes Anderson talks about his influences, but I don't know if he talks enough about how, these Godzilla movies are so influential, the pastels and the symmetrical arrangements and the camera. What is it called when you move the camera? He's doing that now, nonstop, where he moves the camera sideways, right? Never doesn't, or only goes in right angles. But anyways, is that, it's all about the action sequences, and I know that's true about all other action movies, but then it's and then the in-between stuff, I guess it's important. And I feel like I watched that original Godzilla, and I've seen it a bunch of times, but I still don't remember all that stuff, even though I watched it over the summer. What I remember is the action sequences. This film, they're really good, and as you know, I dislike the Marvel movies. And what I realized with all those movies is those big sort of massive city-destroying monster kind of scenes. They're all super fast, and it's like that Transformers, right? Super fast action digital, which I really hate. What's nice about this film, watching it, is it has the really good digital special effects, but they feel more realistic. And I think maybe that's just because Godzilla's slow. You know, like they also used the we'll crank up the camera, have the guy in the suit walk around in slow motion to give that idea of size, and they're still doing that in this modern version with the digital. They're not using, they don't need to use slow motion anymore, right?
Right.
But they do, and they use that effect, and for some reason it felt more realistic to me, even though I knew it was fake. And so that was interesting to me, just because I thought I was just really anti-CGI. But I think it's just because American and sort of Western filmmakers are doing a really crappy job with CGI.
Well, Transformers is shot, they're unwatchable, all those films. There's not a good one in them. And they're shot too close, and there's too many things moving. Like, there should be 4 things that move when the car turns into a robot, not 4,000.
Right.
Stand back and shoot it so that I can see it change. Where that was the cool thing. First of all, the CGI wasn't as good, I would say, as an American film in this film. It was slightly a little rough around the edges. I did not care one bit because it's greatly upgraded from the old Godzilla movies. And they just, you're right, they focused on all the right things. Like the desks sliding through a room and smashing the glass when the building topples over, like for some reason that had heft to me.
And the boats early on, the boats piling up and the cars piling up. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Which you could, I mean, they've kind of done stuff like that in mainstream Marvel like movies too, and other type films, but it doesn't have that same effect. It was really well done.
That seemed more real. What's the, who's the guy that does all the disaster movies? He did a Godzilla movie.
Irwin Allen?
No.
Irwin Allen! This is like an old man reference.
Allen.
Yeah.
Roland Emmerich.
Oh, okay, him. Yeah, sure.
When Roland Emmerich does like cars flying through a street, it almost looks, even though it looks better, it looked more fake. Whereas in this one, when the boats are piling up and he was sort of pushing the boats and cars through the streets, it looked like because shit would just become massive amounts of clutter.
Yeah.
And that looked a lot more real to me. I loved it.
And maybe that's more because in Japan everything's so clean and organized. and it's like, it's just bad enough. Oh, someone's messing up things. And it's like, that's horrifying enough. It's like, oh, the street's got a bunch of cars piled up in it now. Or this building has a broken window, right? Whereas maybe in our world, it's like we're used to more. Yeah. It's just like, oh, just a little bit of disorder is horrifying.
New York just looks like trash day. It's just like New York on Wednesday when the aliens attack. Did you like the movie, Jim?
Oh yeah, it was like just saying with the action, like at the beginning there with the boats. I just was thinking actually it is very realistic, like with the like the tsunami. When they had the bet, I've seen footage of that stuff. Like it's really terrifying. That opening stuff with the boats and everything being pushed, and that was definitely disturbing, relentless. Yeah, the slow pace of it was great. That was just kind of like, what are you going to do? There's like nothing you could do to stop this. But the movie, I really enjoyed the movie. I like all the when Godzilla was sleeping for the whole middle of the movie. It was that kind of went on for a bit with all the planning. But that was fun. It's a completely different way of structuring a movie, or compared to your typical Hollywood blockbuster movie. It was just like you were joking about all the rooms and the offices. They keep changing rooms and all the desks, and when there's a whole action sequence when they're preparing the new office, whatever, and they're like rolling in copy machines and phones, and it was like dun, 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 it was like office stuff. That was very Japanese.
It was like meeting protocols. There were political aspirations. There was like office furniture and office,
And everybody, they had all their titles, their names, all the characters on the screen. It was like kept going. Everybody who's introduced, it's like
every location, every person was labeled. Yeah.
There's no confusion. It was like everything was clear. It's like, okay, this is this person.
Very organized. Yeah, and I think maybe that long, dormant Godzilla part of the film, I feel like maybe you're being generous, like saying, oh, it's a different way of storytelling. I feel like, it's the exact same problem I have with Tim Burton, which is like the third act problem. If you watch Tim Burton films, chronic third act problems before I even knew what that meant, right? What the third act was, right? And also what's Scott Pilgrim, right, has that same thing. The question is that just I am not conditioned for that type of storytelling, or is it now that's become a way of doing these big action kind of films, is that you front load everything and then it's like, you know what? We've got about an hour of stuff here. We got to do 30 minutes of kind of treading water until we can do the ending.
I think there's a couple reasons for it. That just some details this year. So Shin Godzilla is a part of the Shin film series. The other live-action Shin films are Shin Ultraman and Shin Kamen Rider, which we've mentioned.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that. And I have not seen that. I'm excited about that.
I watched both over the weekend. They're phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. The film series is primarily helmed by Hideaki Anno, who does most of the writing, and his directing partner is Shinji Higuchi. Shin is a word that, depending on its pronunciation, can mean new, true, God, or faith. The film's budget was $15 million, which is not much in 2016. And it had a box office of $78 million. So, and this is the first, so he's done a lot of animation up until Shin Godzilla. Clearly, he's a student of this lore, and I think he really modernized it with the way he approached it, had all those scenes in the administrative scenes. I also feel like he was stretching a $15 million budget. I think he said, I've got 8 set pieces, action set pieces, and then I'm going to make this really funny administrative film in the middle of it. I guess the last thing I'll share is I think the inspiration for the film was drawn from the Fukushima nuclear disaster.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. But then also the tsunami, maybe?
And the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, which caused the nuclear disaster.
Right,
I suspect that all that administration struggle was his observations of how the government was trying to deal with something that was continually compounding itself. So there's a tsunami and there's an earthquake and now there's a nuclear disaster. Kind of feel like the 3 phases of what Godzilla did to Japan and then eventually Tokyo. Taking that into consideration, I think your third act problems might have been budgetary as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because when I had Fukushima written down, and then Jim mentioned the tsunami, and it was like, yeah, the tsunami too, and then I was like, okay, the original Godzilla, it's all about the atomic bomb, and Japan, that are just the dealing with that, and then those Godzilla movies moved into environmental issues, right, in the 70s, right, in the late 60s, and I was trying to figure out, what is it? This stuff that now it makes more sense so it was so heavily nuclear in the description of what they're talking about, but it's not the atomic bomb. It is exactly what you said, is that more kind of like, so that helps me a lot because it's like, it's like this modern, it's not going to be just simply one disaster. It's kind of these compounding disasters, right? And the complexity of society and then we've built these systems to deal with that complexity. And then when something happens, how those systems don't necessarily work. And it's about, I think about this a lot, because I am a planner kind of person. And it's just like, there's only so much planning you can do. There are only so many meetings. There's only so much preparation. And then you have to have some sort of ability to improvise in the moment and respond to the unexpected.
Have either of you seen Chernobyl?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
This film kind of reminded me of Chernobyl a little bit too, because you kind of go through the stages of what they had to do. And there at one point,
That actually reminded me that I thought of that when they were at the end. The guy gives the pep talk before the helicopter, or they're going to do whatever the final attack when they're going to freeze it and stuff, and he's doing all that stuff. Some of you might come, but it was like that reminded me of the stuff I've heard about Chernobyl
when they send the miners in underneath it
and the helicopter. I remember hearing the helicopter pilots who died pretty much right away, and they trying to put the fire out were flying through the plume of stuff, and they were all died very quick, not long after.
Yeah, the firefighters all died. Because anybody who was sort of directly exposed to Chernobyl died pretty quickly.
Yeah,
there are miners who are still living today who dug underneath it. Because at one point, had they let it melt down, it would have hit some water source and become a steam cloud that would have eradicated Europe. And
right.
That's why it was amazing to see in Chernobyl. And so they had sent, I think it was like 250 or something miners down to dig underneath it. And they promised them your families will be taken care of with this many, this amount of revenue. And so they're like, you're going to die, but here's how we're going to help your ancestors. And they dug a huge mine underneath the meltdown and then filled it with concrete so they could hold it till the thing went out. And miraculously, it wasn't instantaneous for the miners. Some are still alive today. Many lived kind of normal lives afterwards, but it was scary as shit. But it showed you that was a similar thing where they all started very diplomatically and were like, well, we're going to do A and B and C. And they're like, fuck it, get all the scientists together because we don't know what to do now. And they kind of worked it out.
Yeah, and that was a little funny, and I don't know if because unfortunately I got the dubbed version of this, so maybe it didn't work as well. But the setup that happened multiple times in this film, though, which is like somebody says this is going to happen or this is what's happening, and then someone else says no, it will not, and then that thing happens. And that's like a constant narrative. That is the tension in the film, right? The dramatic tension is always this is going to happen. No, it is not. And then it's like, it happens, and so I felt that was a little simplistic. Also, it's unfair to judge a film based on its dubbing, too, and translation. Although, how else would I have been able to consume it, though, even if it was, subtitles?
It would have been more elegant with subtitles. It was more elegant with subtitles.
And that's my argument, too, is one of my counter-arguments to subtitles are, like, the reason why, like, in that kind of classic film criticism, you're like, oh, why all these... like, for instance, French films, were so popular is to, like, American critics and audiences, they're arty and they're better, is because through subtitles, it becomes more like radio where you're filling in some of it. Like, acting doesn't matter anymore as much, right? Because you're hearing the actors speak, you're not understanding the language, and you're reading what they're saying. You, as a viewer, are more participating. It's almost like what you do when you read a novel. Right? Or when you read, right? You are more a part of it and engaged and filling in the blanks of the performance and everything like that. So I do feel like sometimes I try to be conscious of thinking, oh, this film is great. And then it's like, do I think it's great because I kind of helped make it great because I was reading it? Or filling in the blanks. And like if I saw it in the native language or in my native language, or I could hear it and understand it, would it be like, oh, this actor is actually really awful?
I had that ignorant opinion I shared once in the show. Is like, do directors who have English as a second language, do they know whether or not they're getting a good performance? And sometimes there's bad performances, like in some John Woo movies. And I'm like, does John Woo know that that's a hammy performance that he's getting? I think a little of yes of what you said, but I also argue the opposite. That first I thought this was pretty well dubbed overall. It didn't bother me. It felt pretty good. And I think I even recognized one of the actors recognized his voice as a known voice in American movies, but I think you get more of the performance when it's subtitled too. You do pay attention to the delivery and you know whether or not they're doing something goofy or doing something serious. And I think with the subtitles, with people speaking their native language and delivering things, with that intensity, you can pick up on that, or at least, maybe you don't. I mean, obviously you don't know, because intonation, particularly in Japanese, just the word shin, right? We just said it has like 6 different meanings. So you're not sure if they're delivering those lines well, but you can pick up the intensity or the seriousness of how they're doing. I mean, if you're reading, and so I kind of, and it's well done. And, when I saw it, it was like, it seemed like Japanese officials having officious conversation, and then you just read what they're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm thinking about, I just saw, again, when I was watching TV today, a Jerry Lewis movie was on, and how they always talk about, how Jerry Lewis was beloved in France. And you watch Jerry Lewis films, and I like Jerry Lewis films, a lot of them. You realize, well, it's a lot of visual humor, and so that translates, right? Or visual humor doesn't need to be translated, right? So if you're an artist and your film is more visual based, that would be more appealing to an international or a global audience because you're not as reliant on language and idioms and what's considered a quality performance, right? What's a good performance and a bad performance? It's a complicated thing. But yeah, the reality is it's a Godzilla movie. The stuff around it is important. It's always interesting to see what it's critiquing about society at the time and Japanese society, but it's really about the action sequences, right?
And they were great. Those
Great.
helicopter sequences were phenomenal. I love helicopters. Always wanted to be a helicopter pilot till I realized I was colorblind. Did you do any research on the film, Rick? art direction, DP, movie poster.
I did a little superficial research when you told us that was going to be, we're going to go back to our jobs yesterday. Was that yesterday?
Yeah,
And
well,
so I did.
I gave you a day.
Yeah, no, I looked, I mean, I like the poster. I like it kind of evokes older posters, but then also, was updated, the kind of silhouette. And so it definitely evoked older 50s era poster design, even though that's not what the original Godzilla poster looked like, but it had that kind of flat Saul Bass look almost, but then modernized. So I like that poster. The set decoration, or just the spaces, all the offices. I mean, the copy machines, how heavily paper-based they were, that really upset me. Is like, I really have this fantasy, this Japanese office, even though it was like Japanese office work is being highly computer-based and technical, but everything was paper-based. But then I realized, oh yeah, like Japanese pens, and I'm totally into, I've got one right now, like this little tiny, I've gone through probably hundreds of different types of Japanese pens, It's definitely the office supplies is a really integral part of that culture, or at least my fetishism of that culture, right? It's like I really love Japanese office supplies. That's what I was thinking when I was looking at the aesthetics of it. It's like, yeah, the special effects, but then also like, oh, wow, look at this office space. Look at this equipment. Look at everybody's computers. Some people are using Apples. It was interesting to me. Macs, it wasn't all Windows-based. That got a little far afield from like art direction, but I'm all about cinematography now. I'll talk a little bit about that when we launch into one of my movies. I think I'm going to take a radical position. Not radical, but I'm going to try to do a kind of conceptual thing, and it's going to be cinematography based. But so this film, I was trying to look at the cinematography, and I thought it was okay. It didn't disturb me. It looked good for the era. It didn't look as cheesy as the late 80s, early 90s Godzilla film that I saw. So it definitely, cinematography-wise, it was much better sort of as a contemporary thing, and had that same, not as cool as the 60s Wes Anderson era of Godzilla, monster, kaiju. What do you
Kaijus,
say?
yeah.
Kaiju movies. But it's still pretty good.
This director, or these directors, tend to do this thing where, and I was going to ask you about Kamen Rider, because they do it a lot in Kamen Rider. The camera is an object, like they were all staring at a laptop, and that was the camera. And then at some point they shut the laptop and you can actually see the keyboard as they shut it. And there's like a lot of similar sequences, like they're shooting from like an object. And in Kamen Rider, a lot of the times it's his fist. Like the camera's on his fist as he's punching people. Is that a Kamen Rider thing, or is this the style of these directors to put the camera on? They did that a lot in Kamen Rider.
TV show, the one, the early 70s Kamen Rider I watched a lot of was, there are a lot of handheld stuff. I think it was, I seem to remember, I don't know if I remember fist like flying, that kind of thing, but definitely it was very kinetic. And obviously they're cranking these things out, like probably one a week, they have to put them out, and they're just running around in these suits, in fields, just doing these crazy fight scenes. And they're just, they're like throwing the camera around. It's all handheld camera, and it's very guerrilla filmmaking. I'm sure it was just like fast, just like we got to crank these things out. And so they're just running around with it. They're definitely a very active film or movie camera movements and things like that. But
I'm very excited to hear your review of Shin Kamen Rider, because I think they do a lot to pay tribute to the show.
Yeah, I just started watching the old TV shows again, and you can only take so much after a while. They're kind of, each episode is a bit the same, but it's just a different weird creature. But they're fun. Yeah, they're really fun.
It's called Shin Masked Rider in the U.S. So on Amazon, they don't.
Right.
They use the term Kamen Rider, but they also use the term Masked Rider. There's a reason. There's a plot reason for that too, but I won't reveal it either. Rick, did you notice there are a couple rooms that they were in early on in the film that had the same chair shape but different color fabric, and those chairs and couches were all slipcover based. So I was wondering if, for budgetary reasons, if they didn't just move the same chair frame around and then put different slipcovers on it.
Sure, why not? Yeah. That makes perfect sense.
We have slipcovers because we have cats. So all our furniture is slipcover, and basically we've given up trying to keep nice furniture. We just let them tear the shit out of it take the slipcovers off and put new slipcovers on and have nice furniture for a little while.
That reminds me, I was on another podcast, a different podcast, going behind the back of this podcast, although it was between seasons, talking about After Hours and them talking about how they built all of the apartments in one giant loft. All the loft stuff that happens in After Hours, different lofts, they're all the same space, different corners, and then I think they redid a room to be the same room. Yeah. So that's just part of it. It's like, yeah, you don't have the budget. You gotta figure out how to recycle. I'm trying to think of the other film I was watching where, it was just like literally like watching Green Acres or something. And or any of those shows, right? Yeah, I think I was watching Green Acres, and then you watch like a Twilight Zone episode, and then you watch like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and it's all, that, what is it, the Warner Brothers backlot, the city backlot?
Oh,
and
yeah.
you just start seeing, if you wander off and you start looking at the backgrounds, you just start saying, oh, there's that building again, and there's that, oh.
Well, any town USA is Smallville, Gilmore Girls, and Hazard County.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I loved, that was one of my favorite things to do, was to walk the lot and just walk through any town USA, because then they'd be filming, like, if for a fall scene, they come and wire leaves to the trees. Like those trees, none of those trees have real leaves.
Right.
They wire whatever color leaves they want, and if it's Christmas, they take all the leaves off and throw fake snow down. So great.
Yeah.
Kansas City. Food-wise, once only known as a barbecue town. But thanks to the Taco the Town podcast, everything has changed. Kansas City has rightfully taken its place as a taco paradise, smack dab in the middle of the USA, and all of these tacos belong to us on the Taco the Town podcast. My name is W. David Keith, certified tacoholic, and I live a very taco-centric lifestyle. On the Taco the Town podcast, we're tasting every taco in the town. We shine a light on all of the taco-rific tacos Kansas City has to offer, unearthing great taco memories, checking the latest stories in taco news, and interviewing actors, reporters, chefs, politicians, and musicians about their love for tacos. If you love tacos like I do, you're gonna love Taco the Town. Available wherever you get your taco podcasts. A proud member of the Lotus Pod Podcasting Network.
Jim, anything about the music?
Well, I like the closing credits with I'd forgotten the original Godzilla. I had seen, the re-release of the original, not the weird American one we all grew up watching on TV, but edited one. But it'd been 10 years since I don't know, probably saw that. But I'd forgotten until you said that was the original music. It was great, the theme. Good Gojira theme. I liked the metal guitar stuff coming in, like at some scenes, like halfway through. It was like, wasn't your typical, there was like the scientists talking, the crackpot scientist group where they're trying to figure out what to do, and the woman says something, like, they figure something out, and then it was like an action. It's like, let's do it or whatever, and the guitar just goes, and I was picturing it just cutting away to them all just playing, like jamming, like a Buckaroo Banzai or something. They should have done that, where they're like, just, okay, that's enough playing. Let's get to back to work or something, But it just was almost like they were playing the music, or I just pictured them going off.
That's another great thing about the Godzilla pinball machine, is that it has all those old Godzilla songs, and it features them all really prominently in the game. And then when you get to that, I described where you knock the building down, you lock 3 balls, and you get the multi-ball, you can choose one of, I think 5 songs that they play, but I always let it roll with the Blue Oyster Cult Godzilla, and it's just so kick-ass to be playing like a multi-ball to that song.
That Smells Like Teen Spirit, right? Is Godzilla the one that Smells Like Teen Spirit? Always reminds me. I always feel like Smells Like Teen Spirit was actually a Godzilla lift.
Is it? It goes, oh no, there goes
The
Tokyo.
guitar riff.
Oh, Godzilla.
Jing, 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 ga-ding.
Oh,
Ding,
yeah,
ding, ding, ding.
yeah.
You know how people always talk about, they ripped off that Killing Joke song, which they actually got, right, they had to pay for, but I always felt like Smells Like Teen Spirit was Godzilla.
What Killing Joke song did they rip off?
Is it Come As You Are? Yeah, that's a Killing Joke
riff.
song.
That's
yeah,
ripped
it's
off?
a great riff. Yeah, totally.
Oh.
You should go. You should check out some early Killing Joke, Chris. You'd really like it.
Are they named after the comic, Killing Joke?
Oh, I don't know what came first.
I don't know.
Killing Joke started in the late 70s. I mean, they were a little like post-punk, a little after.
Interesting. Because the Killing Joke, the comic I've read, is more modern than
Yeah. So then they must have, that must be a reference, a Killing Joke reference,
Yeah.
the band. Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah, Jim, you mentioned, the Gojira. And then, so they reversed it in this film, right? So I want to know about that, where they said the Americans are calling it Godzilla and we're going to call it Gojira. So what's that all about? They're flipping the history, because that's what happened. Originally, it was Gojira, right, in Japan, and then they translated it as Godzilla for the U.S. market.
Correct.
But in this film, in Shin Godzilla, they explain it as backwards.
Do they explain it backwards? Or because the guy who named him Gojira was the scientist who killed himself right on the boat.
Okay, so he's the guy, and he's from the early, like maybe from an earlier era.
Yeah, I don't know.
The guy in the boat.
Because the U.S., I thought, read his stuff
Okay.
and then translated it to Godzilla.
Okay, so this still exists in a world where the earlier Godzilla existed. Is that what it is?
Oh, no.
Or that guy? No, that
I
guy
think
just
this is the
predicted.
first.
The guy
He predicted
predicted a Godzilla.
He predicted Gojira. And the
Gojira.
Americans took that.
Called that Godzilla. And then
should
they're...
call it-
Okay. That was very confusing. I was very confused. I needed some labels on that. Oh, that's what I wrote down. Richard Scarry, like, the Richard Scarry books where everything's labeled. It's like car, a mailman. What do people do all day or whatever it's called.
Right.
Yeah, busy
Yeah, I think
world.
that's exactly what it's called. What do people do all day?
Busy world. All those books. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's what this movie is. It's got all the labels. Everybody's labeled. That's great.
It is totally. It's not to get to, it's stereotyped Japan and everything, but with all the trains and with the train bombs when they're attacking Godzilla, and they had the little, it's like a train set, and it's all, this is so Japanese. It's like, whew, and they look like the train sets, and this is almost a stereotypical. I mean, are they doing that on purpose or no? This is just, they're really into this.
The little like pump trucks.
Yeah, and the little trucks, and it's all
The dental.
Yeah,
Dental visit.
The dental instruments.
the model. Yeah, it's like models, little model cities.
I was talking to somebody who had just spent some time in Japan and had spent time in Japan before, and he was like, yeah, I really love it there, and I love how clean and organized everything is, and I really want to live there, but then it was like, but I'll never belong there. He was just like, I could, it's like, it is like Disneyland in a way where it's like, oh, this is a fantasy place, and it's like, I would love to live here, but then it's like, oh, you're going to be Godzilla if you live there. That's the one thing I remember about visiting Tokyo. And there was another American guy that was showing us around, and he was like 6'5", giant guy. And it was just like a monster movie. It's just like this guy barreling through Tokyo, sticking out like a sore thumb, even though he lived there. And it was just like, I love this fantasy world, but I can't ever be a part of it.
I feel really, really bad because if I go to Japan, I am going to go to Tokyo Disney Sea and Universal Studios, because Tokyo Disney Sea is supposed to be incredible, and then Universal Studios still has the Jaws ride, and I want to go on the Jaws ride so bad. Not the tram where the Jaws jumps up, but like the legit Jaws ride where you're in a boat and you go all around and like you get trapped in a garage and it lights on fire and stuff, and then Jaws is chasing you. He's trying to drag your boat, and then I'll have to spend another 10 days actually doing Japan things.
Yeah, that's like when I was in Tokyo and we went to McDonald's and Mr. Donut. It's like, this is not good. Should not be doing this.
I broke down and went to McDonald's. I think, where was I? I was in some country, and I was like, I'm just going to have McDonald's today. I can't remember what it was.
I can remember, one of our tour, Rick and I were on tour in Europe, and like the tour manager guy was talking about driving around with
Los Lobos.
He was tour managing them, and their code was the American Embassy. It was like, take us to the American Embassy. The U.S. Embassy meant they wanted to go to McDonald's,
And then, he was just like, oh, they would be so miserable. It's like, Luke, or whatever his name was, take us to the American Embassy. And that's what we started calling it too. I don't think I was a vegetarian at the time, but it was like that was the thing, is I would never eat at McDonald's when I was home, in the U.S. But it's like the instant you're on like a 6-week tour in frickin' Germany, it's like at some point I gotta I got to go to McDonald's, man. I got to get back connected with my roots. I'm totally at sea here. It's amazing how powerful that is. It's like burned into your head as an American.
After so much bread and cheese and
You need to have Americanized bread and cheese and meat.
I was in India just the end of last year, so less than a year ago, and Kentucky Fried Chicken is everywhere. It's wild. Like it's definitely winning the fast food war in India. I didn't have any, though. I ate Indian food the whole time I was there. I was pretty proud of that, but it was just wild to see how much Kentucky Fried Chicken they had.
I spent a year of my life for 6 weeks in Indonesia. But Indonesia at the time didn't have any McDonald's because they were having problems with beef standards, but it was all Kentucky Fried Chicken. Like the only Western chain at the time was Kentucky Fried Chicken because chickens, it's pretty easy to get high quality chicken or whatever it is. You know, a chicken's a chicken. It's a bird, right? You know, but it's like getting McDonald's quality beef and shipping it or growing it. It's just not possible at the time. I'm sure they have it now, but yeah, they're different standards. India, there wouldn't be a big hamburger, right? That wouldn't be a big hamburger market.
No, you wouldn't think that would be very popular in India. Which character do you relate to in the film? Rick, which character would you say you were in the film?
Ooh, wow. I'll have to think about that for a second. Jim's gonna have time to say something funny. He's gonna come up with something good. But I'm not gonna try to be. I'm just trying to remember all these people.
yeah.
I'm gonna say the third executive from the Shibu province.
Rick with a
That's
very
just-
nebulous answer.
Yeah, that's just, there are so many people and they all get labeled. And I started thinking, oh, they're labeling these people because I'm going to need to remember them. But then after about the 50th person, it's like, wow, I don't need to know who all these people are. This is the only time I'm going to see this person.
You wouldn't have been a scientist?
I would, yeah. Where they first have everybody's in suits and it's all the politicians. And then they bring in the 3 crazy scientists who don't know, who are just as clueless, right? Yeah, I'd be one of those guys. Because I also sometimes, I know that I think I could be one of the other guys with the suits, like even within my current job. And then I'll see something like that and I'll realize, oh no, I'm the guy with the scraggly beard and the vest, right? Right? The jungle vest or whatever it is, the camera vest, right? It's like, I'm not, I'm the goofy, professor guy.
Jim, who would you be?
Oh, I don't know, like the puppy Godzilla. I related to him
I like
at the
that,
beginning.
that's right.
I liked him. I keep thinking, but that's the same Godzilla. I wasn't thinking, I was thinking it's a different character. I was expecting that one to be like the real Godzilla was going to come out later. Like that was just,
You thought that was a red herring.
It was just the baby puppy one. And then mommy or daddy Godzilla would come out after it. A lot of characters in this movie. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. Definitely one of the scientists, the weird, I guess, identified with them, the trying to
Think outside the box people.
Yeah.
I could see you do that, bringing in all these odd facts and figures to consider.
I liked the character, the woman who was completely the genius biologist, whatever she was, was just like coming up with all the answers or just like cutting to the chase, and just like, oh, this is what's happening in this. And she's just like analytical or sitting there typing away, and it's like, oh.
They would program her with information, and then she would do something with, like, when somebody else figured out the origami thing, but then she then took it and ran with it.
Yeah.
I would like to think that I was like the friend politician guy who was like really cool and laid back and was like, don't worry about it, you'll take care of it. But I think in reality, I'm the guy who became the new prime minister, and the guy who's just like, I don't know.
Agriculture guy.
My
noodles are soggy.
That guy, the guy who thought his noodles were soggy. I'm pretty sure that's what I would be. I'd be appointed that role, and I'd be like, "Can I get some dry noodles here?" Oh well. As we wrap up, as we time box our episode today, Jim, should this film be lost?
No, of course not. It was. Yeah, it was really well done, like an update. It's great to take, the original ones were, are always kind of corny and or joke. But then, when I finally saw the original cut of the original, it was like, oh, this is amazing, an incredible movie. So they started really great. And then, they got pretty corny along the way. But then it's great to see someone taking it seriously again. And there's a little jokey parts, and you can't take it too seriously, but it's a serious presentation of it, a reimagining of it, and modern. It's done really well.
Yeah, I loved how sincere they do all these shows. These movies are really good. Ultraman and Kamen Rider too. Mm-hmm. Rick, should it be found, would you recommend this to a student or coworker?
Sure.
It's pretty innocuous, right? I mean,
Yeah, this is when you frame it that way, it's always, then I always go spinning off. It's like, oh, it depends on the person.
this one I would say to anybody, and then if they would obviously filter it, they'd be like, yeah, I don't watch monster movies or sci-fi. But if they did, I wouldn't be embarrassed if they watched it. I would think they would think it was pretty good.
One of the core problems with my life is that, nerd culture became mainstream culture, right? And so all the things I loved as an outsider when I was younger now are just normal and mainstream. And so I do think Godzilla movies are similar in that respect. I also do feel like I haven't heard as much about the Shin Godzilla, the Shin sort of series, right? Still feels a little nerdy and not just, oh, this is a Japanese version of Marvel.
I think this guy is sincerely nerdy. I don't see this as somebody trying to take Iron Man to the mainstream or Godzilla to the mainstream. We have those movies and they're terrible.
Yeah. And they've made, right? I haven't watched any of the new American or sort of Western productions, Godzilla productions, right? There have been a couple now recently, right?
Yeah, well, there's the Roland Emmerich one. It's terrible. It's unwatchable. There's the latest in the new series because then the Godzilla one was such a huge letdown with Bryan Cranston. Okay. Then there was King Kong movie, and I forget what it was called, but it was pretty good. I liked it. It was kind of like an Apocalypse Now King Kong movie. And then there was Godzilla, King of All Monsters, which Michael said I might enjoy. I actually did enjoy it. I thought it was pretty damn good. And then there was Godzilla versus Kong, which was exactly as it was billed. It was fun when they were like having a big haymaker fight between Godzilla and Kong. And it was like an amusement park ride where this I would still call a movie.
Yeah.
Should this film be rewound, each of you, would you watch this again, Jim?
Sure. Yeah, in a little while. There's to maybe write down what all those keep track of everybody's job title and
kind of try to map out.
Figure out who everybody what their roles were.
Yeah.
I was getting a little stressed out because it was like, is there going to be a test after this? There's like who all these people. It's
like does the box set come with an org chart? Maybe? Or
I don't know. I hope so. There's got to be some poster that has everybody on it.
And their relationship to each other and where they are in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Will you rewind this film, Rick? Will you watch it again?
I don't know. I maybe. I wouldn't turn it down. I mean, I do. We've talked about this before. I miss the era of not having complete control and choice. It's one of the reasons not to go back again and again, talking about watching Green Acres or Wild Wild West, where it's like, oh, you got a channel and it's just playing, and then you see what you see. And so if this film came on while I was in a hotel in 1992, of course I'd watch it again, right? But it's like I don't live in that world anymore, right? Where these films, like things don't present themselves to you. You're not a captive audience, right?
But you watch things that I wouldn't rewatch. You watch Green Acres or Wild Wild West, because I watch those things so incessantly and would build a life schedule around watching those things, or would skip band camp unbeknownst to my mother to watch Three's Company back-to-back, episodes. That stuff I don't go back to, I don't know, almost just because I've got so many better choices.
See, that's the thing is like watching Wild Wild West, it's amazing. Deeply homoerotic too. Like realizing how there's a lot of stuff going on in these, and also how it is like the old TV Batman mixed with a Western, and how crazy that show was. Seeing things I remember, vivid memories from childhood. Like, it's like, wow, this weird robot car, episode, and you realize it's supposed to be in 1870, and it's like, oh, cars didn't exist and everything like that. Like all the sci-fi stuff, flying saucers, it's like how they were putting in all of like 60s TV culture stuff. Like everybody had a quicksand episode and a flying saucer episode and a robot episode, but then they were doing that in Western. So for me, it's interesting to see these things through older eyes and then seeing what's still enchanting about them, but it's not just nostalgia. It's like, wow, these are really fascinating cultural artifacts, and also hold up, or at least are a lot crazier than even some TV now.
Which reminds me, on that Warner Brothers lot I talked about, the Gilligan's Island Lagoon is there, and the Tarzan trees. There's actually this huge tree, was gigantic, and they said basically we just shot this tree from 30 different angles, and those are all the places where Tarzan would like land and swing from and swing to. was really, really cool. But
You know, it reminds me, I just watched old Roger Ebert commentary track on Citizen Kane, and he's talking about there is this one crazy shot where they're doing a picnic out in Xanadu, and the background, I always remember, it's like the background, it looked like pterodactyls are flying by in the background, right? It's supposed to be Florida. Xanadu, I think, is supposed to be in Florida as opposed to San Simeon, right? And yeah, Roger Ebert's saying, yeah, I think they just took the back projection from a Tarzan movie or King Kong or something. It was like, yeah, he's going through, a lot of his commentary is going through how they did shortcuts, how they cut out costly things. You know, a lot of it is just matte painting, right? But then, yeah, just stuff like that where it's like, oh, yeah, I think if you watch, I can't remember, he couldn't remember what movie it was either, but yeah, if you just watch Tarzan such and such, you'll see the same backdrop as in Citizen Kane. It was really, really great.
Matte paintings blow my mind. All those things you mentioned, I love to get smart. Like any sort of gadgets. Like I was such a sucker for a car. Like I would watch the Munsters just to get a glimpse of that car, or the dragon under the stairs, or the shoe phone, or any interaction with sci-fi, or all the Batman shit was so cool.
Yeah.
I just was a sucker for that. And when I early got into Bond, first Bond I saw was Moonraker. And I thought it was a good movie because it was like he had this boat with all this kick-ass shit on it, and I forget when that came. Maybe I was 10 years old or 8 years old maybe when Moonraker came out. It was right after, so it was like 78 or 79. I think it was a Star Wars kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I was just all in for any of that kind of stupid shit that they would put in stuff. But I'll have to watch Wild Wild West.
12, yeah. So that's the thing is Wild Wild West. Yeah, you watch it. It's like 12-year-old boy shit. But like it's great. But there's also, it's just crazy. But yeah, that reminded me totally of George Barris Cars, right? So all those, the guy who did all those cars.
Oh, yeah.
Custom cars like the Monkey Mobile and the Batmobile and the Munster Mobile and all those crazy things.
Vox guitar car.
Yeah.
I always remember that. Or, we always got it like in grade school, the library, or check out.
It like was the most in demand.
Picture book of, photo books of those cars. That was always a great thing instead of reading a real book.
That and the book on cryptids and, like Bigfoot and aliens and vampires and stuff like that.
Ghost photography. I had book like that terrified me.
The spontaneous human combustion.
Yeah.
Was always in those books.
Well, as we conclude, guys, how does it feel to be back?
I don't know. It feels confining. It feels like we don't have freedom anymore. It feels like we're restricted by these boundaries put upon us, barriers, maybe even.
Maybe logistics.
I
mean, the fact that we have to go to bed, whereas before we weren't together. Now we're together.
Right. Yeah, because we did do this in person for a while, right?
And the episodes were short when we did it in person.
Right.
Because we had to go to bed.
We had to go to bed.
Maybe we should do each part of the podcast in a different room. We should change rooms and different setups.
We should at least put new slip covers in the chairs.
Yeah.
I just wrote a note that the Western Springs Police Station, I'm sure I've talked about this, I always talk about it, is we did a tour of it when I was a little kid, got a little booklet about nuclear fallout, nuclear preparation. They told us at the Western Springs Police Station that this downstairs room was the control center for Chicago if Chicago got bombed. Wow. It's like they had a whole little control center in the basement of the police station that the governor and the mayor of Chicago could go and sit down.
Because they all lived in Western Springs?
No, it was just because it was like they had some kind of blast radius thing, but I don't know. That was in the early 70s. By the 80s, right, we all figured that it was just going to be like a kind of carpet bombing situation. You wouldn't have, even if you were in the suburbs of Chicago, you would probably get nuked, right?
Yeah.
I think that was, it was an earlier, more innocent age where they thought, they're just going to nuke downtown Chicago. And then if you map out the blast radius, Western Springs would be a good location to have a...
We thought nukes were that accurate?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Drop it right on the lakefront. You get a nice big circle. Draw that circle.
Lat long. You don't want to drop it a little more inland, right?
I remember as a kid where our dad worked at a national laboratory. One of the entrances, we drove down the road. We wouldn't, whenever I went there to where he worked, it wasn't the main way we usually went, but every once in a while we'd go down this other road, and there was a tower, this big old metal tower, about 50 foot high, just off in the woods, And my dad was like, oh, that's the old Nike missile base. It was the radar tower for the Nike missile. The lab was a target. I guess in the Cold, it would have been a target.
Oh, so it would shoot down any missile coming at it?
It's from the old, before intercontinental ballistic missiles. It was the old, before that, it would have been bombers, So you'd have to shoot down the bombers.
Oh.
Like Failsafe or Dr. Strangelove. But then ICBMs all kind of made that all null and void because, you wouldn't have to send bombers in to bomb the sites. It would just be missiles coming in. So these weren't secret. Like there's one by the Museum of Science and Industry right on the lakefront there. Was one of the Nike missile bases was there. They were just underground. They were just little trapdoor things would pop up, and they were anti-aircraft missiles, but they had a radar tower next to it. But that was still there in the 70s. I remember it was like, oh, that's the radar tower. It's just like the one by our house by
the golf ball.
Yeah, it's a radar dome
by the old GM electromotive plant.
Just like that, except it was just the tower was left. That's all that was left. I was like, oh, that was a missile.
Well, the
missile's
missile's still there. They just
could
just crawl down in there and just poke a few buttons. Well, I guess my final apology as we conclude here is I didn't get to use my microphone today. I used a microphone that Rick very ominously asked me if I was comfortable using. He's like, you see, I was too dumb to even know what my apprehensions would be to use this microphone.
I'll tell you, the thing is that I used to get sick on tour all the time, and that was because you'd use the club's microphones. They'd sometimes disinfect them, but they wouldn't disinfect them between bands. There was one time where I'm singing vigorously and then I suck in and you inhale kind of years worth
Lemmy's spit.
Yeah, of everything. Yeah, it's just like, it's the most disgusting thing. And then once I started using my own microphone and traveling with it, which seemed very, very bougie, as the kids say, right? But it was like, oh, yeah, you got to do that because, you're basically poisoning yourself if you use a microphone that hundreds of other people have used. And so that's all I was saying. It's just like, are you comfortable using this older microphone?
I'm not scared. I had my first cold in 3 years, like I said 4 weeks ago, and it's still residual. You can hear it in my voice, but it was wild because I hadn't had a cold in forever. Masks and.
Did you enjoy it? Was it a good time?
Nostalgia.
To have the cold?
Yeah.
No, it sucked. Sucked. All right. Well, very good to see you, gentlemen. We'll see you maybe in a month. Somewhere.
Great.
Somewhere, yeah. Different room, maybe.
Different room. Different slip covers.
Lost and Found and Rewound is fully funded by Lost and Found and Rewound Foundation funds. Lost and Found and Rewound does not use crowdfunding because our listeners have better things to do with their funding. There's no need to post reviews of Lost and Found and Rewound because our listeners have more valuable things to do with their time. In all sincerity, thank you for listening to the show. We truly appreciate it.
Lotus Pod.